What's up, everybody? My name's Mark with CardZoom, and today I wanted to show you the Blue Black Improvise deck I've been playing around with. As far as the cost of this deck, it's going to fall between budget and, oh my god, where did my paycheck go? So it's kind of on the mid-range of decks. And please note, this is a work in progress. I will show you multiple versions of the deck, and I'm changing it rapidly. Now, before we hop into the deck build, I wanted to speak for a minute on net decking. Now, as many of you may know, Desolator Magic has waged a war against net decks, and he speaks out against net decking as a unnecessary evil in the game. Well, I'm going to walk you through how I made this deck, and then I'm going to ask you, is this a net deck? Alright, so it all started when I wanted to build a mono black sort of aggro deck, and I wanted to include some of the Aetherborn cards, like Gifted Aetherborn, and see if that tribal could really work, the Aetherborn tribal. Gifted Aetherborn being 2 mana for a 2/3 Death Touch lifelink just seemed like a pretty good shell to start with. Also, I thought maybe this guy could get out some Fabricate fodder. Yahini's always nice, pretty fast. Yanti, playable. And then Midnight Entourage to buff them all, and I was also using Metallic Mimic. So that's how it all started, and the way I built the deck is obviously by searching for Aetherborn like that, but also I literally went through every standard card, every artifact and black card, just like this. Every single one. It didn't take that long. I mean, you'll see where I'm going with this, but I went through and I built the deck. I played about 30 games with it, okay? And let's see. I probably pulled 100 cards out to the side, and then I slowly built the deck. I didn't look up anything online. I didn't net deck it. And I built the mono black Aetherborn Rush. That's what I called it, Aetherborn Rush. And I played about 30 games. Well, the deck was pretty fun, but it couldn't, and there were a couple times where I had perfect draws and it just really blew up and I won the game and it was awesome. But through about 30 games, it was apparent that it couldn't keep up with any of the top tier decks. So I eventually splashed blue for some control. Well, after more playtesting, I added some more blue. And eventually, the deck had a little more control aspect to it. At this point, I was still trying to make somewhat of a budget deck, and it didn't have any Tezzerets in it, but as the deck became stronger, I realized that he fit perfectly because he makes artifacts, he draws out counterspells, so they wasted on him, and then you can land a turn 5 Herald, and he removes threats big and small. So I added him, and at first it was only 2 copies, and now I'm up to 3. 4 is a possibility, but I only have 3 on paper, and I'm actually trying to get real playtesting in for my F&Ms. So after I got to this point of trying tons of cards in the deck, I tried Bonesaw, I tried, every artifact you can name. I tried Pacification Array, Shard of Broken Glass with the Ornithopters, and it synergizes a little bit with Scrap Heap Scrounger. Just countless cards that I tried out, And after logging about 60 games with the Blue Black Improvise deck, I felt that I'd finally come up with something that was pretty strong and was winning about half or more of my games, and it was even favored against some of the top tier decks like Aetherworks Marvel and black-green counters. So it was at this point I decided to look up other Blue Black Improvise decks to compare to see, did I brew this? Is this my creation, or, is this just a whole archetype? Now, although I didn't find any decks that were exactly like mine, there are many that are similar. For instance, this one. Tezzeret's Touch, I found it to be too slow. Renegade Map, I don't know. This is just, a completely different deck. And there's all kinds of different versions of it. So, you might be wondering, what's my point, right? Well, my point is it's stupid to hate on net decking, and standard especially. Because the card pool is so small, you can literally pick a strong mythic like Herald, brew a deck around, well, quote-unquote, brew a deck around it, and spend 24 hours or less. I did stay up all night, like 2 nights in a row, and played a ton of matches, but, more or less, you can figure out what the best combination of cards are. It's built into the game. It's designed, the cards are designed to interact together, and it doesn't take a genius to figure it out. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. I know it'll take a while to really solve the format, as they say. But my point is, hating on net decking is silly because the cards are designed the way they are for a reason. This is just my opinion, but I do feel a little conflicted now, and I still don't think it was a waste of time because I do feel like I truly understand my deck now and all the options it has. And so without further ado, here's the current version of the deck. And I'm sure it looks a little funky, but for instance, having the 2 of each counterspell for round 1, that's for a reason. It's so, because you don't really know what you're going to come against round 1. And these usually come out sideboard round 2, but against some like slower, weak decks, I do like to have these in game 1 because it allows me to get out my heralds faster and just try to win the game. Because this is I like to lean towards more of an aggro beatdown style deck rather than control. I mean, I do like playing control also, but for this deck, now I'm running the Bastion Inventors. Still testing these. These may not be in the final version, but having a 4/4 hexproof can't be underestimated. These, I'll start at the top. Hope of Gearper, it's a legendary, so I try to only run 2. I have ran more before, but it just doesn't always work, kind of more of a sideboard card, but it works well with Improvise, and I mean, hell, some games you get it out turn 1 and they just don't have an answer for it, so you're hitting them for 5 damage for 1 mana. And then eventually it might end up being what saves your Herald from getting destroyed. Scrap Trawler, I know it's kind of weird, I'm only running 1, but it kind of doesn't synergize with Scrap Heap Scrounger in a way, since he takes cards out of your graveyard. I do like to have 1 just for those long matches, like sometimes I'll have out Inventor's Fair and I can fetch him out. I don't know, still testing with that. It's kind of weird having a 1 of, I know. Scrap Heap Scrounger, I love it. It just makes, they just have to answer to it, basically. Servo Schematic. The reason this is so great in this deck is because it's 2 mana for 2 artifacts right away, and then possibly a 3rd. And it makes for perfect fuel for your Herald of Anguish because he can blow it up, kill something with -2/-2, and then you have no net loss of artifacts. You get another artifact back, so it's perfect. Ornithopter, I've tested Cathar's Shield and Bonesaw, but Ornithopters are great for blocking, and actually I meant to make 1 change. I am now running 1 Cathar's Shield because most games for this deck, I don't have a way to really pump the Ornithopter safely. I mean, very rarely, maybe with Tezzeret, but having just 1 shield, I can fetch it with Inventors if I need to, but surprisingly, I've actually been able to keep the Herald alive longer. It's good against certain decks, and not to mention, you can also, let's say you have 4 artifacts out and you have a Scrap Heap Scrounger. Well, you can throw this on him, and then you can actually buff your own guy. Assuming they don't have any blockers or something, it won't kill him because he'll have 5 toughness. He'll get +4/-4, but he'll still have 1 toughness left. And that can be pretty useful. So don't underestimate the Cathar's Shield. I will say, if you're not on any budget at all, Walking Ballista is a good card in the deck. If I had any on paper, I sold the one that I had. If I had any, they would at least be in the sideboard, because there are decks that just get wrecked by Walking Ballista. Of course, it can be fatal pushed, but it synergizes well with Cathar's Shield also. So if you're running those, maybe run another one of these, because you can keep alive your Ballista until you have some mana to sink into it, which is an interesting sort of strategy that I've done. So, of course, we've got Bastion Inventor, basically because after playing the deck enough, it just needed more mid-level / finishing cards. Tezzeret is sort of he definitely helps your mid-game, but he's not necessarily a finisher, unless you use him to buff somebody. But the Herald, there's just not enough of them to go around. I mean, I would run 8 of these if I could, honestly, because the whole deck is based around this. these are just nice to have. I mean, I'm still testing it, but I really like them so far because you get them out early and they just can't deal with it. So, negate, obviously good for countering planeswalkers and stuff. Metallic Rebuke, I had 4 of these, and I do see a lot of decks running 4 of them, and they can be great, but I mean, sometimes you have to go long with this deck, and being kind of control-y, the games can run long, and then eventually you have this is just a dead draw because they're always going to have 3 mana extra. That's just in my play testing. I may bump this back up to 3, but 3 is the most I'll run of this card, personally, after my play testing. Alright, Grasp of Darkness, on the other hand, I have it in the main deck instead of Fatal Push, and I don't feel like I need the Fatal Pushes also. Once again, I try to make this more of a rush down deck than a control deck. But I just found being able to kill a 4/4 to be a lot more useful. Sometimes you use it in concurrence with the Herald or Walking Ballista if you're running that, or say they block your 1/1, then with the 5/5, then you grasp it, or it's just a good card, and it's less picky than Fatal Push, so that's why it's in the main deck rather than Fatal Push. In my testing, Fatal Push is just a much better sideboard card. Now that's just me, that's just my experience after 100 games on X-Mage. Your local store might be different, but this is a reactive card, and I don't want to have as many reactive cards in my deck. In my main deck, I want to have cards that are just about me winning, At least that's the way I look at it. So moving on, we have Anticipate. Like I said, this it really just helps you get out your Herald a little earlier, or like fix mana and stuff like that. You can keep your mana open for a counter spell, and then if they don't play anything you want to counter, you can anticipate at the end of their turn. So it just kind of makes everything smooth. Choked Estuary. I don't run 4 because the deck needs to be fast. So I do run 4 Spire. I also have just one of these. I did have 2. Ended up favoring the Spire over it because it is a legendary land. So it is nice for the life gain. I mean, with Servo Schematic and these 0 things, it's feasible to be gaining life right from your second upkeep. But not necessary really to gain life in this deck, or it shouldn't be. Evolving Wilds, it's nice to thin your deck out. I don't run 4 because, once again, this deck has to be fast. You can't miss a turn 2 Reverse Engineer, or you can't miss like a turn 3 Herald because of Mana Screw or whatever. So, also with Fatal Push, it's notable that you can trigger Revolt using your Evolving Wilds, so that's always good. Spire, just a nice mana fixer. You will always have an artifact out in this deck, or you're doing something terribly wrong. And it may not look like much, but remember, these are all doubles. These come back. This gives you stuff back. So, I mean, they rarely deal with these. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome. 3 Tezzeret's, like I said, just synergizes excellently with the deck. I realized just having a really solid 4-drop that they almost always are going to try to counter spell. And then you can drop a turn 5 Herald. And then they're suddenly discarding cards and at card disadvantage. It's just a great move. Oops. But, and then Reverse Engineer, I would like to run 4 of these, but it just didn't work in my playtesting. It just didn't work for me. So, 3, I think, is the hot spot. I wouldn't do 2. It took me a while, actually, to get up to 3, but 3 is where I'm at. And then the sideboard is actually really strong for this deck, in my opinion. Against Eldrazi, I've got these. Still testing this card, but I like it in principle. I haven't really got to play it, to be honest, but I know it exiles your Heralds, but the idea is if you're playing against a deck with a bunch of big stuff like Eldrazi, you play this first, it screws them over, then you play your Herald, using this to improvise it out. Possibly. Horribly Ari really screws with black-green tokens, vehicles. A lot of decks get screwed by this. Another negate for like spell / planeswalker decks. And Yahinis, because honestly this deck isn't, well, it is kind of creature heavy, but it's not like insanely creature heavy. So there are times where like they'll wipe the field, and then I don't know. I still haven't tested this card a ton, but I just like it, and I like the tempo swing of it, that it lets you kill everything but also still play a 3-mana card. So that's the current version of the deck, and here shortly I'm going to upload another video that's going to be a slightly different version of the deck, but some of the gameplay stuff, and it's going to be a little sped up, so that should be fun. And then if you guys like that one, I'll post some more gameplay of this version of the deck. They're very similar, it's just slight changes, but yeah, thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Really appreciate it.